Captain Alina Orson stood at the command bridge of the Erebus, her gaze fixed on the massive viewscreen that showed Earth shrinking into the distance. The ship's engines hummed with quiet power, but to Alina, there was a silence that hung in the air, a weight she had carried with her for years. She felt the familiar pull of solitude, something she had learned to embrace. Her crew, a mix of seasoned astronauts and scientists, bustled in the background, preparing for the journey ahead. But for Alina, the vastness of space wasn't just a frontier of discovery. It was an escape, a place where her past could fade into the stars. The mission was a historic one, humanity's first foray beyond the known galaxy into the unexplored depths of the Great Void. The Erebus had been constructed with the most advanced technology ever conceived, a ship capable of surviving the unknown, outfitted with AI-assisted navigation systems, quantum engines, and shielding capable of protecting them from cosmic anomalies. But even with all of that, Alina knew that the true test wouldn't be in the ship or its systems. It would be in the unknown. What lay beyond the stars wasn't something they could plan for. It was a vast and terrifying mystery, one that only the bravest, or perhaps the most reckless, would dare to confront. The crew gathered for the final briefing. Alina took her seat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable as she addressed them. The frontier we are about to enter has never been charted. We don't know what's waiting out there. All we can rely on is our training, our trust in each other, and our ability to adapt. Our mission is simple: explore, map, and return. We will be gone for 5 years, but what we discover out there could reshape everything we know about the universe. A murmur of agreement ran through the room, but Alina could see the unease in their eyes. The unknown frontier was a daunting prospect for even the most seasoned explorers. Everyone knew the risks, but few could truly comprehend them. She let the silence settle before she continued. I know some of you might think that this is about glory or fame, but it's not. It's about the survival of humanity. Everything we do out there could be the foundation for generations to come. Our mission will not just be about mapping new worlds, but about ensuring the future of Earth. A young officer, Lieutenant Marcus Henson, spoke up. Captain, what about the signal? The one that came through just before launch. Should we be worried about that? Alina's gaze sharpened. The cryptic transmission had arrived only hours before departure, a series of distorted, unintelligible signals that seemed to originate from deep space. The timing was too coincidental to ignore. Her gut told her it wasn't just random interference, but she couldn't afford to let fear paralyze them. We'll investigate it when we get there. For now, our focus must be on the journey. This is humanity's first step into the unknown. We won't let distractions sideline us. The crew nodded, though Alina sensed the underlying tension. Fear of the unknown was a powerful thing, especially when you had no way of predicting what would come next. As the final preparations were made, Alina stood up from her chair. The weight of the mission pressed down on her shoulders, but she was resolute. This wasn't just a journey into space, it was a journey into herself. The silence of the void would be her constant companion, just as it always had been. All hands to stations, she commanded, her voice steady but filled with quiet authority. Let's chart a course into the unknown. The crew moved into position, each of them ready to face whatever lay beyond the stars. As the engines roared to life and the Erebus slowly broke free of Earth's gravity, Alina Orson allowed herself one final glance at the planet below. She was leaving behind more than just the world. She was leaving behind everything she had known. And ahead, in the vast expanse of the cosmos, awaited something far more uncertain than any chart could predict. The Erebus drifted toward the unknown, its course set. Alina stood at the helm, alone in the stillness, her mind already racing toward what they would find and what they would become. The Erebus surged forward, its engines propelling them deeper into the uncharted expanse of the Great Void. Stars faded into distant pinpricks, and the vast dark space ahead seemed to swallow them whole. The ship's advanced systems hummed around Alina, yet a strange stillness hung in the air. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the palpable sense of something watching, something ancient and waiting. Alina sat in the command chair, her fingers lightly grazing the console, eyes locked on the view screen. The crew was at their stations, working tirelessly to ensure their path remained steady, but there was an unspoken tension among them. The unknown had a way of bringing doubt to the surface, and Alina could sense the unease creeping into her crew, despite their best efforts to remain professional. "Captain, we're picking up something," said Lieutenant Henson, his voice laced with both curiosity and apprehension. He was a skilled communications officer, but even he sounded uncertain. Alina turned to face him. "What is it?" "It's not a signal. More like a distortion, something in the fabric of space itself. It's fluctuating." Henson's fingers flew over the console, adjusting the frequencies. "It's coming from ahead. Whatever it is, it doesn't match anything we've encountered before." Alina's stomach tightened. The signal that had reached them before departure had been cryptic, unintelligible. But this was different. This was something alive, something that didn't belong. "Can you triangulate its source?" Henson shook his head, his face paling slightly. "No, Captain, it's everywhere. All around us. It's as if space itself is shifting." Alina stood, walking over to the main console where Henson worked. She leaned in, examining the readings herself. The distortion wasn't just a minor fluctuation, it was a complete disruption in spacetime. The sensors were having trouble interpreting the data, and the more they analyzed it, the more it felt like they were being surrounded by a vast, invisible force. "We need to go around it," she ordered. A murmur rippled through the crew. Some wanted to push forward, others wanted to turn back. But Alina knew that hesitation would be fatal in this unknown realm. They had to move fast before the anomaly grew more powerful. "Set a course, Ensign Leo. Maintain full speed, 30 degrees to port," Alina instructed, her voice unwavering. Liu, the navigation officer, worked the controls quickly. "Aye, Captain, adjusting course." The ship lurched as it began to veer off course, the engines humming louder in defiance of the distortion. But the anomaly wasn't going to let them escape so easily. "Captain," shouted Dr. Kara Patel, the chief scientist, from her station. "The disturbance, it's pulling us in." Alina's heart skipped a beat as she turned to face her. The ship shuddered under the immense pressure, and the warning lights began to flash across the bridge. Every system on the Erebus seemed to react to the disturbance, flickering and sputtering like a fragile thing in the wind. "Engage shields," Alina barked. "Full power to the engines. Leo, push us faster." But it was too late. The invisible force surrounding them seemed to pulse, a living entity in the void, growing stronger with every passing moment. The Erebus was caught, pulled like a leaf on the surface of a river, dragged towards something far beyond their control. "Shields are holding, Captain, but—" Liu's voice faltered as the screen flashed, showing space itself distorting around them. The stars stretched, their light bending as though they were caught in the grip of a massive hand. Alina's mind raced. "Can we break free?" "We're being pulled into it. At this rate, we'll be inside the disturbance within minutes." Liu's fingers flew over the controls, trying to outmaneuver the invisible force. The crew scrambled to contain the ship's rapid descent toward the heart of the anomaly. But as the Erebus inched closer, the ship's systems began to short-circuit, their instruments flickering and dying one by one. Outside, the stars vanished entirely, replaced by swirling darkness. The crew fell silent, each person feeling the terror of being lost in a vast, unknown nothingness. Alina could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, a constant reminder that they were no longer in control of their fate. "We're not going to make it," Lieutenant Henson muttered under his breath, his voice tight with fear. But Alina refused to let herself panic. She wasn't going to let the crew fall victim to an invisible force they couldn't even begin to understand. "We're not done yet," she replied, her voice sharp. "There's always a way. We'll find it." Just as the Erebus neared the center of the distortion, a sudden blast of energy shot through the hull, throwing the crew off balance. The ship lurched violently and alarms blared. "Damage report," Elena demanded, gripping the armrest of her chair as the Erebus trembled. "We've lost power to secondary engines. Shields are down to 40%. Hull integrity is compromised." Ensign Liu's voice was strained with the effort to stay calm. Elena's mind raced. They had moments, if that, to escape the anomaly's grip. Her fingers flew over the console, calculating their options. She knew they had only one chance left. "Elena, what do we do?" Dr. Patel called, her voice laced with fear. Her answer came as she locked eyes with her crew. "We fight." The Erebus was caught in the grip of something ancient, something that defied their understanding of physics. But Elena knew one thing: humanity would not go down without a fight. With a final resolute command, she pushed them into the heart of the distortion, ready to face whatever waited in the dark. The Erebus plunged deeper into the heart of the anomaly. The once calm stars were now mere pinpricks, swallowed by the ever-expanding blackness that surrounded them. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp, twisting in unnatural ways. Time itself felt distorted, like an old, malfunctioning film reel. Every second stretched and compressed, as though the universe itself was playing tricks on them. "Shields are holding at 35%, Captain," Lee reported, her voice strained. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she fought to maintain control of the ship. The lights flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows across the bridge. Every console hummed with static, and the air seemed thick with tension. Elena stood at the helm, her mind racing. Their trajectory was unstable, and no matter what they tried, they couldn't break free from the growing force. The Erebus was trapped, its engines sputtering in the face of something far beyond their comprehension. She gripped the console, her knuckles white. "Can we calculate a way out?" Elena asked, her voice calm but laced with an edge of urgency. "Not yet, Captain," Lee replied, eyes wide as she looked at the erratic sensor readouts. "The anomaly's core is unlike anything we've seen. There's no predictable pattern. It's like it's alive, adapting to every move we make." The ship groaned under the pressure, its hull creaking as though it too was fighting against the unseen force. Outside, the view was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Swirling black clouds, streaked with flashes of light, wrapped around them like tendrils, pulling them deeper into the unknown. The stars had been replaced by swirling, distorted shapes, half-formed constellations, shimmering, unreal. "This can't be natural," Dr. Kara Patel, the ship's lead scientist, muttered. She was frantically analyzing the data from her station, her hands trembling. "It's as though we're being manipulated by something that exists beyond the laws of physics." Elena turned toward her, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, whatever this is, it's not just an anomaly. It's as if we've crossed into a different realm, one that doesn't follow the same rules as our universe." Dr. Patel's voice wavered. "It's not just bending space, it's warping the very nature of existence." Elena's mind raced. If that was true, then they weren't just dealing with an environmental hazard. They were up against something ancient, something that had the power to reshape reality itself. The cryptic signal they had received before departure, the distortion in space, the pull of the anomaly, they were all connected. She glanced at Henson, the communications officer, who was monitoring the ship's frequency. "Anything new on the signal?" Henson shook his head, his face pale. "It's still coming through, but it's distorted. The pattern is more chaotic than before, almost like it's trying to communicate with us." He paused, "but it's unintelligible. All we're getting is static and strange tonal fluctuations." Elena considered their options. Every moment they spent in the anomaly was a risk. The Erebus was losing power, and their trajectory was becoming more unpredictable. If they didn't find a way out soon, they'd be pulled into the heart of whatever this thing was, and no one knew what would happen if they did. She turned to her crew. We need to understand this anomaly. It's the key to escaping. Dr. Patel nodded, her face set with grim determination. If we can find a way to stabilize the core energy readings, we might be able to disrupt the anomaly's influence. But we need to get close enough to take readings, close enough to the center. Then that's where we're headed, Elena said, voice firm. Liu, adjust our course. We're going straight into the center of this thing. Liu hesitated, looking over the data before nodding. Aye, Captain, it's risky, but I'll set the course. The Erebus groaned again as it shifted in the grip of the anomaly. Elena's eyes flicked to the view screen, where the black void seemed to pulse like a living entity, its tendrils stretching toward them. The unknown force was closing in on all sides. The ship's power flickered once more, and the lights dimmed to a near shadow. We need to move faster, Elena said. Every second counts. Captain, said Lieutenant Henson, his voice tight, there's something else, an object, deep within the distortion. It's massive, but it's not registering as anything we know. It might be a remnant of whatever created this thing. Elena's eyes narrowed. A remnant? It's unlike anything in the database, Henson replied. It doesn't match any known technology or phenomenon. It could be the source of the distortion. Elena's heart pounded. This was no longer just about surviving the anomaly. They were headed straight for the heart of whatever had caused it. It was no longer just an exploration mission. It was a battle for survival. We'll make it through, Elena muttered under her breath. We have to. As the Erebus hurtled toward the unknown object at the center of the anomaly, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. Elena had no illusions about the danger they faced. Whatever they were about to encounter, it would be unlike anything humanity had ever seen. But they had no choice. They couldn't turn back now. The unknown stretched before them, dark and vast, but Elena felt something stirring within her, a quiet determination. Humanity had come this far. It wouldn't falter now. The journey into the heart of the void had just begun. The eerie stillness in the Erebus felt suffocating. The crew floated in a disorienting weightlessness, as if the very fabric of space had lost its grip on them. Outside the view screen, the swirling anomaly had vanished, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar landscape, one that defied any known physics or logic. The void that had once consumed them now seemed peaceful, almost serene, yet there was an underlying feeling of something far older and far more dangerous at play. Captain, Liu's voice broke through the tension, shaky yet focused. I can't get any response from the navigation systems. All our instruments are offline. It's as if we're in a vacuum that doesn't follow the laws of physics anymore. There's no up, no down, no direction. Elena's eyes scanned the bridge, her heart pounding in her chest. The crew was still floating, tethered to their consoles, trying to regain control. The lights flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across the room. It felt like time itself was suspended, like they were trapped in a moment that wasn't part of any known timeline. We're in a dimension beyond our understanding, Dr. Patel said softly, as if testing the words. This isn't just a place. It's something else. Elena turned to her, her gaze hard. I need answers, Kara. How do we get out? I don't know, Dr. Patel replied, her voice low but steady. I've never encountered anything like this before. This isn't just a spatial anomaly. We're inside something far older, perhaps something alive. Henson's voice came next, tight with apprehension. Captain, there's something else. Something on the edge of the sensor array. It's moving fast. I think it's heading straight for us. Elena felt her stomach lurch. What is it? Henson's fingers danced over his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. I can't get a clear read. The energy signature is unlike anything we've encountered, but it's alive. It's emitting some kind of pulse, consistent with a biological entity, but its size, its speed, It's unlike anything that should exist. Alina's breath caught in her throat. The thought of an unknown, possibly hostile entity approaching them sent a ripple of fear through her. The Erebus had been built to withstand the harshest of conditions, but against something that defied every rule of the universe, they had no way of knowing what they were dealing with. "Can we defend ourselves?" Alina asked, her voice steady despite the growing anxiety. Liu, still trying to stabilize the controls, gave a grim shake of her head. "Our weapon systems are offline. Nothing's responding. It's as if our presence here is irrelevant to whatever's around us." The ship's hull groaned, a deep, resonant sound that reverberated throughout the bridge. Something was drawing near, something enormous. A pulse of energy washed over the Erebus, its intensity so powerful that it rippled through the very air, distorting their senses. The view screen flickered to life for a brief moment, showing a massive, shapeless shadow moving through the void, its edges constantly shifting like liquid in motion. Alina gripped her seat, forcing herself to stay calm. "Prepare yourselves," she ordered. "Whatever this is, we need to understand it if we're going to survive." Before anyone could respond, the ship shook violently. The disturbance was like nothing they had experienced, an overwhelming force that made the Erebus feel as fragile as a paper ship in a storm. The lights flickered out entirely, plunging the crew into complete darkness. A low guttural hum vibrated through the hull, and the temperature dropped sharply. It was as if the very fabric of space around them was folding, twisting, bending towards some unknown center. Then, as quickly as it had come, the disturbance stopped. Silence. The crew remained frozen in place for a moment, suspended in the stillness. Alina's breath was shallow, her mind racing with possibilities. Whatever had just happened, it was a warning. They were being watched, studied, maybe even tested. "We need to find out what we're dealing with," Alina said, her voice firm. She turned to Dr. Patel. "Kara, can you make sense of the readings?" Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "I'll try, Captain. But these readings," she paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. "These aren't from our universe. The fabric of space-time here is fundamentally different. But I think I'm seeing something familiar. Patterns. They remind me of a long-forgotten set of ancient texts." Alina raised an eyebrow. "What kind of texts?" "Pre-Empire," Dr. Patel replied, her voice quiet but growing in intensity. "Something that described the passage of entire civilizations across galaxies, through spaces we once thought untraversable. But if this is true," she paused, eyes widening with realization. "If this really is the place described in the texts, then we might be inside a cosmic web, a gateway connecting not just different points in space, but entire worlds, realities, perhaps even timelines." A chill ran down Alina's spine. A web? A network of dimensions? "Yes, a kind of trans-dimensional highway," Dr. Patel said, voice trembling with awe. "And if we're here, then we are part of it. We've crossed into something vast and ancient. We might not just be trapped in another universe. We might be in the midst of something much bigger." Alina's gaze swept across the crew. The stakes had just escalated. They weren't just explorers anymore. They were intruders, and whatever they had disturbed, whatever watched them now, would not let them leave easily. "Stay sharp, everyone," Alina said, her voice cold and determined. "We need to figure out how to survive, and what this place really is, before it decides what to do with us." The silence was deafening. The Erebus hung motionless in the void, suspended between realities, its systems still erratic and unresponsive. Alina stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the data feeds, desperately searching for any clue about where they were or how to escape. Her mind raced as she tried to process what Dr. Patel had revealed. They were trapped in a trans-dimensional web, a gateway that spanned not just space but time itself. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. This was no longer just an exploration mission. They were playing with forces that were far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Alina, Henson's voice broke through her thoughts. There's something moving around us. It's huge. I don't think it's just one thing. There are multiple entities. Alina's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, entities? Are they biological? Henson hesitated. I'm not sure, Captain. They're moving in formation, but they're not acting like anything we've seen. It's like they're part of the environment itself, blending in with the fabric of this place. Show me, Alina ordered, her voice steely. The view screen flickered to life, showing the outer edges of the Erebus as proximity sensors. At first, there was nothing, just the swirling darkness of the transdimensional expanse. Then, slowly, shapes began to emerge. Indistinct, vast, and impossibly complex. They seemed to shift in and out of existence, their forms stretching and folding, like beings made of energy or thought rather than matter. Are they alive? Elena asked quietly, almost to herself. I think so, Henson replied, but I don't know what kind of life they represent. They don't fit into any category we understand. Elena felt a pang of unease, but steeled herself. They had to keep moving forward. They had no choice but to confront whatever was out there. Dr. Patel, what are we dealing with? Are these the creatures you mentioned in the texts? Dr. Patel's voice trembled as she spoke. I don't know, Captain. The texts were vague. They described sentient beings that lived within this web, but they never specified what they were or how they operated. All I know is that they were said to be the weavers of the web. They were the ones who kept it intact, ensuring that the gateways between realities remained stable. Elena's thoughts raced. Weavers. The word felt ominous, like the ancient legends of spiders spinning webs in the darkness. She glanced at her crew. They were all struggling to make sense of the situation. The unknown was pressing in on them from all sides. Suddenly, the Erebus jolted again, sending everyone reeling. The hum of energy surged through the hull, and the view screen distorted as the enormous shapes moved closer, their presence warping the very space around them. It was as though the Erebus was being gently nudged, not by force, but by a guiding hand, an invisible pull that drew them forward. Captain, something's happening, Liu said, her voice tense. I think they're trying to communicate with us. Alina's pulse quickened. Communicate? How? Liu's fingers flew over the console, her eyes wide in disbelief. The energy patterns, they are becoming more structured. It's like a signal. It's not just random pulses anymore. It's trying to form a pattern. Can you decipher it? Elena asked. Liu hesitated. I'll try, Captain. But it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's not radio waves or any kind of electromagnetic transmission. It's more like thoughts. Thoughts? Elena repeated, incredulous. It's hard to explain, Liu said, her voice strained. It's like we're being flooded with a kind of mental energy, a wave that's hard to interpret. But there's definitely something trying to communicate. Elena clenched her jaw. The situation was getting more bizarre by the minute. They were inside a trans-dimensional gateway, surrounded by incomprehensible beings, and now they were receiving what seemed like telepathic signals. Dr. Patel, do you think these beings could be trying to establish contact? Elena asked. It's possible, Dr. Patel replied. The ancient texts mentioned that the weavers were caretakers of the web, not conquerors. They were keepers of balance, and their purpose was to maintain the stability of the gateways. If they're trying to communicate with us, it may not be hostile. It could be a test, or perhaps a warning. A warning? Elena repeated. A warning about what? I don't know, Dr. Patel admitted, but we should proceed with caution. As the Erebus drifted closer to the pulsating energy of the creatures, Elena felt the weight of the unknown pressing on her. The communication signals were growing more intense, like waves crashing over their minds. The crew exchanged nervous glances as the pressure mounted. Elena could feel the very air in the room growing thick with anticipation. "We're not alone here," Elena murmured, her voice filled with a new understanding. The web they had entered wasn't just a place, it was alive, and its caretakers, the weavers, were watching them closely. Their next move would determine whether they would be allowed to pass through, or whether they would become part of the web themselves. "Liu," Elena said, her voice firm, "keep trying to decode that signal. We need to understand what they want. Dr. Patel, prepare a team for possible first contact. We need to be ready for anything." The crew braced themselves, waiting for what would come next. Whatever happened, they had no choice but to face it head-on. The web was alive, and they were its guests, whether they liked it or not. The eerie calm of the trans-dimensional void pressed in on them like a suffocating weight. The Erebus hung motionless, surrounded by shifting shapes and pulses of energy that felt like fingers brushing against their minds. Elena stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the view screen, though the shifting patterns outside were no longer coherent. They seemed like fragmented glimpses of something vast, something ancient and deeply unknowable. Liu was still trying to decipher the energy patterns coming from the beings around them, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Captain," she said, her voice tight with effort, "I think I'm starting to make out a pattern. It's not exactly language, but it's like a code, something we might be able to process." "How much longer?" Elena asked, her voice sharp with urgency. Liu's fingers flew over the console as she worked, sweat beading on her forehead. "I'm not sure, Captain. The signal is complex. It feels like it's wrapped in layers, like it's meant to be decoded, but it's almost organic." Before Elena could respond, the Erebus rocked again, but this time it wasn't from external forces. The sensation came from within, like the ship itself had been pulled by an invisible tether, guiding them deeper into the heart of the trans-dimensional web. The view screen flickered, and the massive, shifting shapes appeared again. This time, they were closer, vast, almost formless, but undeniably alive. Energy rippled across them like static on a screen, and Elena could feel their presence pressing against her senses. "This is not just a test, is it?" Henson said from his station, his voice strained. "They're hurting us. They're directing us towards something." Elena's jaw tightened as the realization hit her. They were being led somewhere. The beings, the weavers, weren't just watching them. They were guiding them, drawing them closer to whatever lay at the heart of the web. "Liu, are you getting anything?" Elena asked, her gaze fixed on the view screen. Yes," Liu replied, voice trembling with the effort. "I think I've cracked part of it. The signal, it's fragmented, but there's something coherent coming through now. It's almost like a communication. Not telepathic exactly, but a directed impulse. I think they want us to understand." Elena's pulse quickened. What do they want us to understand? Before Liu could answer, the lights flickered and dimmed, and the ship's systems sputtered as another pulse of energy washed over them. This time, it was different. The hum was lower, deeper, vibrating through the hull, and it felt like it was pulling at something inside Elena's chest. It was as if the very nature of the ship, and perhaps her, was being probed, examined. "Captain," Dr. Patel's voice came through, unusually calm in the face of the growing tension. "The web isn't just a structure. It's alive. It's sentient. I think we're being evaluated." "Evaluated?" Elena repeated, her eyes narrowing. "By whom?" "I don't know," Dr. Patel said. "But if these beings are the weavers of the web, then they have the power to control the flow of entire dimensions. They're watching us, testing us, seeing if we can understand the rules of this place." Elena glanced around at her crew, who were all in a state of near constant alert. They had ventured beyond known space, into the heart of something that defied everything they had learned. The web wasn't just a physical phenomenon, it was a living entity, and they were now a part of it, trapped by its rules and watched by its weavers. "We don't have much time," Elena said, voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "Liu, decode the signal. We need to know what they're trying to tell us. Liu nodded, her fingers hovering over the controls. I'm working on it, Captain. Wait, I think I've got it. It's not just a message, it's a command. A command? Elena repeated, her heart racing. What kind of command? Liu's eyes widened as she read the screen. It's directing us to something, a location, a specific point in the web. It says, join the convergence. Elena, Henson said, his voice cutting through the growing tension. Those entities, they're moving toward the same point. The convergence, we're being forced toward it. If we don't act, we'll be drawn in. A cold chill ran down Elena's spine as she considered the implications. What is the convergence? I don't know, Captain, Liu said, her voice trembling. But the message is clear, we're being pulled to it. And I think they want us to be part of it. Part of it? Elena repeated, horror creeping into her voice. What do you mean? Are they going to assimilate us? I don't think it's that simple, Dr. Patel said, her voice cutting through the fear. If the web is alive, then the convergence could be some kind of event. A ritual, a union of dimensions. We could be at the center of something much larger than ourselves. Great, Henson muttered. So we're either part of a cosmic ritual, or we're going to be swallowed by a trans-dimensional entity. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Whatever it is, we have to go. We don't have a choice now. Prepare for whatever comes next. This could be the key to understanding the web and how to survive it. With a final glance at the view screen, Elena steeled herself. The Erebus was on a collision course with the unknown. There was no turning back now. The Erebus shuddered as another wave of energy passed through the ship. The force was gentle but insistent, like the pull of a magnetic field, drawing them toward a singular point in the trans-dimensional web. Outside, the shifting forms of the weavers grew more distinct, their vast, amorphous shapes bending and pulsing as they seemed to guide the ship deeper into the heart of the phenomenon. Elena felt a tight knot form in her stomach. They were approaching the convergence, the mysterious focal point that the weavers had directed them toward. The thought of what awaited them at that location filled her with both dread and awe. This was it. The culmination of everything they had encountered since the anomaly had first swallowed them into the unknown. Captain, Liu's voice cut through the tension, her hands flying over the console as she tried to stabilize the ship. The signal is intensifying. It's becoming more urgent. The weavers, they're definitely expecting us to reach the convergence. But I can't get a solid read on what's there. The data, it's fragmented. It's almost like the web itself is distorting our sensors. Elena's eyes flicked to the view screen. In the distance, the convergence point loomed ahead, a swirling mass of energy, light, and shadow, a place that defied all conventional understanding. It was neither space nor time as they knew it. It was something else entirely. At its center, a vortex of energy spun, its edges blurring as though it were pulling in everything around it. The weavers, once formless and distant, were now gathering around it, their movements synchronized in a way that made it seem like a grand cosmic dance. They're waiting for us, Henson said, his voice strained, his eyes locked on the sight outside. And I think we're running out of time. They're drawing us in faster. If we don't act soon, we might not be able to stop this. We don't have a choice, Elena said, her voice steady despite the rising panic. She turned to Dr. Patel, who was now standing beside her, deep in thought. Kara, what do you think is happening? What is the convergence? Dr. Patel hesitated, her eyes unfocused as she gazed at the vortex ahead. The ancient texts, they spoke of this. The convergence is a focal point where the weavers allow certain entities, ones that have passed their trials, to merge with the web. It's a place of great power. A place where multiple realities can converge, where dimensions can overlap and intertwine. Elena's mind raced. So, it's some kind of ritual. Perhaps, Dr. Patel said, her voice barely a whisper, but it could also be a choice, a transformation. If we're drawn into the convergence, we could become part of the web, our consciousness merging with the fabric of these realities. We would cease to be individuals and instead become part of something much larger, something timeless. The idea was overwhelming, and Elena could feel a shiver crawl up her spine. It was a fate worse than death, losing oneself in the vast, unknown expanse of the web. Yet, at the same time, there was a strange allure to it. The thought of becoming part of something so vast, so ancient, was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "We can't let that happen," Elena said firmly. "We need to find a way to sever the connection. If the Weavers want us to merge with the web, we have to stop them before we reach the center." "I've been trying," Lou said, her voice tight with frustration. "But the more I try to redirect the Erebus or cut off the energy flow, the more the ship is pulled toward the convergence. It's like we're stuck in a tractor beam. Whatever force is at play here, it's too powerful for our systems to handle." Elena glanced at the view screen, watching the convergence point grow larger with each passing moment. She could feel the pressure building, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. They were running out of time, and the closer they got, the more it felt like they were descending into some kind of cosmic trap. "We need to make a choice, Elena," Dr. Patel said, her voice filled with quiet urgency. "If we try to fight this, we might destroy the Erebus and ourselves in the process. But if we let go, if we allow ourselves to be drawn into the convergence, we could be part of something far greater than ourselves." Elena clenched her fists, her mind racing. She had always known that humanity's reach would exceed its grasp, but this was beyond anything they had ever imagined. The universe, or rather, the multiverse, was much larger, much stranger than they had ever believed. "I don't know if I can accept that," Elena said, her voice thick with determination. "We've come too far. We're not just going to become pawns in some ancient game. There has to be another way." Liu looked up from her console, her face pale with the strain. "There's another signal coming from the convergence. It's not just the Weavers. There's something else there. Something I think we might be able to communicate with." "What is it?" Elena asked, heart pounding. "I don't know, Captain, but it's reaching out. It's trying to make contact." Liu's voice shook with a mixture of fear and hope. "If we can establish a communication link, maybe we can stop this. Maybe we can turn the tide before it's too late." Elena turned back to the view screen, her eyes narrowing on the growing vortex. The Weavers were waiting. The convergence was drawing them in, and soon there would be no turning back. "Prepare the communication array," Elena ordered, her voice resolute. "We're going to try one last gamble. Whatever is out there, whether it's friend or foe, we'll give it one chance to help us." The Erebus was drawing closer to the vortex. They were about to face the heart of the web, and with their fate hanging in the balance, Elena knew they were standing on the precipice of something that would change humanity forever. The Erebus was now only moments away from the convergence point. The vast vortex swirled before them, its edges flickering with energies that defied understanding, as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. The Weavers, now fully surrounding the ship, pulsed in synchrony, an otherworldly rhythm that seemed to reverberate through the crew's bones. "Captain," Liu said, her voice almost lost in the hum of the ship, "I'm activating the communication array. I'm not sure what will happen, but we have to try." Elena nodded grimly, taking a final look at the view screen. The Weavers were closing in on them, and the ship was no longer moving under their own power. It felt like the Erebus was being pulled into the heart of the vortex, where something far greater awaited. "This is it," Henson muttered from his station. "If we don't get through to whatever's in that vortex, we're done." Liu's fingers were a blur on the console, activating systems that the crew had never fully understood. The communication array was the most advanced piece of technology they had, designed to bridge the gaps between dimensions, but nothing had prepared them for this. The moment the array hummed to life, the entire ship seemed to resonate with it. A strange pulse washed over them, one that felt like a deep internal hum pulling at the very core of their being. Alina could hear it, like a voice, distant but clear, reverberating in the back of her mind. The voice came not through speakers, but directly into their thoughts, its tone strange and alien, but somehow filled with purpose. It wasn't telepathy, not exactly, but something more complex, an attempt at communication through layers of understanding beyond their comprehension. "You have arrived," the voice said, its resonance filling the ship. "The web calls to those who seek, those who endure, but the path forward is not without cost. The convergence is a trial, a final choice. To become part of the whole, to merge with the fabric of existence, or to remain apart, to preserve your individuality. Both paths lead to the unknown." Alina's heart raced. This was it, the decision they had been dreading, the decision that could change humanity forever. "What do you mean by cost?" Alina demanded, her voice shaking with urgency. "What happens to us if we refuse?" The voice paused for a moment, as though weighing its response. Then it spoke again, its tone growing somber. "The cost is the loss of identity. To remain apart is to sever your connection to the web, forever. You will no longer be part of this network, and your consciousness will drift, scattered and alone. But if you join the convergence, you will become one with the web, part of an infinite tapestry. Your existence will transcend time and space. You will be something more, or you will cease to be as you are." The weight of those words hung in the air. The crew exchanged looks, each of them grappling with the enormity of what was being asked. To lose their humanity, to lose themselves entirely in the vastness of the web, or to preserve their individuality, knowing they would never again be a part of the greater whole. Alina's mind raced. She thought of the lives they had led, the struggles they had fought through to reach this point. Could they really give up everything they were? Could humanity truly become something beyond itself? What if this was the key to survival? To understanding the universe in a way that no one had ever imagined. "Alina," Liu said softly, her voice breaking through her captain's thoughts. "I don't know if we can go back. The ship, our systems, are starting to break down. We've come so far, but I don't know how long we can hold on." The pulse of energy from the convergence grew stronger, pressing in on them from all sides. It felt like the web was closing in, offering them a choice, but also threatening to consume them. The vortex before them seemed almost alive now, its swirling depths calling out to them. Alina took a deep breath, looking over her crew. She could see the fear, the uncertainty in their eyes, but also something else, resolve. They had come this far together, and whatever decision they made, they would make it as one. "There has to be another way," Alina whispered. "We can't just become that. We can't lose everything we are." Liu looked up at her, her eyes filled with quiet determination. Maybe we don't have to lose everything. Maybe we can change the web instead, become part of it without becoming one with it. We're human. We adapt. We survive. We don't just fit into a predetermined role. We carve our own path." Alina nodded slowly, feeling a surge of hope, and at that moment, something within her clicked. She realized that the web, the weavers, the convergence, all of it, was not an end, but a beginning. Humanity had always fought against the odds, never content to simply accept fate. They were explorers, adventurers, pioneers. Even in the face of something as vast and incomprehensible as the web, they could still find their own way. "We'll make our own choice," Alina said, her voice firm with conviction. "We'll forge a new path. Humanity doesn't kneel to the unknown. We shape it, and we will do that together." With that, Alina issued the command. She ordered the crew to override the systems, to reroute the ship's power, and to activate the energy shield that had been their last line of defense. They were no longer going to be passive participants in this cosmic trial. They would fight back, using everything they had learned, every ounce of ingenuity that made humanity what it was. The Erebus shook violently as the energy from the convergence collided with their shield. The ship groaned under the strain, but Elena held firm. The crew had made their decision. They would not be swallowed up by the web. As the ship veered off course, moving away from the convergence, the voice echoed one last time, its tone less certain now. You have chosen the harder path. The web will remember. But know this, the trial is not over. It is only beginning. The vortex before them swirled violently, but the Erebus had broken free. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Elena allowed herself to breathe. Humanity had faced the unknown and refused to be consumed by it. They had made their choice, and the universe would never be the same again.